Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today I am presenting Fyhia. Fyhia is a 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons non-player character, and she is specifically a human bard with a noble background. And this non-player character is available to game masters to use in the traditional non-player character way within a story structure, or it's available to players as a contact for their player characters, which you could access through the new Unearthed Arcana downtime rules. Okay. All right. So with that, let's jump in. So Fyhia is currently she is a human bard, female human bard with a noble background. And her backstory is that 4 years ago, she was a princess, full-on princess. So when she was 19 years old, she was a princess in the kingdom of Maresh. There were 2 daughters. So the court of the kingdom of Maresh consisted of King Maresh, Queen Maresh, Princess Fyhia, and her 1 younger sister. Okay. By the way, the kingdom of Maresh is located on the world of Thracion, on the world of Thracion. Okay. All right. So with that said, Princess Fyhia is when she was very young, her absolute favorite thing to do was to watch old Melniboke come and perform at court. So old Melniboke was a very old human bard, and he would come to the court he was always welcome at the Maresh court, okay? And when he would come, he would just sing all these old tales, right? Now, the king and queen and Princess Fyhia's sister would always wonder why Princess Fyhia liked him so much, because his songs were all he did was just sit on a table and play songs with this lute, right? But the songs were very rich, and he did have a good voice, and it was entertainment. But it wasn't nearly as entertaining as many of the other bards and even bard troops that would come to court. But Princess Fyhia really, really liked old Melniboke, and it was her favorite thing. So that goes on for, from the time she's 5 years old all the way up until she's 19 years old. When Princess Fyhia is 19 years old, her father, King Maresh, engages her without her consent to Prince Lisharn. So Prince Lisharn is a prince of the Lisharn Kingdom, which is directly next to the Maresh Kingdom. At this point, Princess Fyhia is brought to Prince Lisharn, and she meets him, and it goes very well. And actually, she's relieved, and she's less stressed over the whole situation. They return to the kingdom of Maresh. So the king and Princess Fyhia return to the kingdom of Maresh. Well, along come Tormal and Praish. So Tormal and Praish are a duo of rogues. And Tormal is a dragonborn rogue, and Praish is a half-elf rogue. Okay, they come in and they actually scout the court. Okay, and one of them comes in as a stable hand, and then one of them comes in as an aide in the kitchens. So they take about 2 weeks and they scout out the entire castle. They learn all the areas, and then at that point they make their decision, and they begin essentially what is a heist. Okay, so they go into one of the closer towns to the Maresh's main castle, and they hire a powerful wizard. Okay, and the powerful wizard actually hires on with them, and they agree to split the take of what they get 50-50 with the wizard. That night, all 3 of them get close to the main castle of Maresh, and they begin to enact their plan. So Tormal and Praish immediately sneak into the castle in the middle of the night, and they kidnap Princess Fyhia, right? And they remove her from the castle and bring her 5 miles into the woods, 5 miles into the woods in the proximity of the main Moresh castle. Okay. At that point, the wizard sends his familiar to court and waits until the morning. Okay. And in the morning, once everybody's there at the main, once everybody's there in the court area, the owl flies through one of the windows, and then at that point, the owl then says, the wizard begins speaking through the owl, and the wizard says, "Listen, we have your daughter, and I am a great wizard. I'm speaking through my owl familiar, and we have your daughter, and if you don't do exactly what this owl says, your daughter will die." Okay? Also, if I stop seeing through this familiar at any point, your daughter will die. So if anything happens to this bird, your daughter will die. Excuse me. So at that point, what happens is, he says, and then the wizard continues, and he says, what you're going to do is right now you're going to go get 2 carts full of gold. You're going to go to your treasure rooms, and you're going to load up 2 large carts full of gold and gems. And don't go skimpy on the gems. All right? Then you're going to take an escort of 50 of your men, any ones you choose, and they're going to bring you 3 miles west into the forest. At that point, and then I will give you further instructions. That's what they do. Actually, let me stop. So at this point, the Queen Fyhia immediately, like without even talking, just runs to the treasure room and starts digging out the treasure and giving commands to fill the carts. Well, her dad, Princess Fyhia, the king, her dad, the King Moresh, he's moving a lot slower, right? And he's not super happy about this, but he grudgingly goes to the treasure room and begins to help, right? And and Queen Moresh gives King Moresh a big kiss and says, be careful. I want you to come home safe, and I want your daughter to come home safe. And King Moresh is just kind of grumpy and like, this is terrible. He's just kind of upset more than anything else, right? So the cart is then taken into taken into the forest, right? And the king's guards escort him 3 miles, right? So at that point, the owl speaks again and says, okay, that's it, your men have to stay behind. You are now going to lead these 2 carts with their horses to a new point, and none of your men will follow. If any of your men follow, your daughter will die. And also, if you try to take any steps to take any of the gold out of the carts or do anything that we don't ask you to do, your daughter will die. So there's actually about a 2 or 3 minute period where the king is kind of mumbling to himself. He's pensive. He's trying to make a decision, and finally the owl says, "It seems like you don't want to do this. That's fine. We'll just kill your daughter now. You can take your gold home." Right? And he's like, no, don't do anything. And then at that point, he brings, he starts moving forward, and he does. He leaves his men and he leads the carts. The owl leads him another 2 miles away. Okay. And then at that point, he comes within 100 feet of where Tormo and Presh are. Now we're going to back up. Okay. So about 10 or 15 minutes before this, Princess Fyhia, prior to this time, Princess Fyhia has been held by Tormo and Presh. Now, Tormo is a stone cold killer, right? He has no qualms about doing any of this. Now, Presh, he has a little bit of a, he's a terrible rogue, and he has some sympathy, and he actually takes off the gag for Princess Fyhia and removes the bandages that were covering her eyes and tells her, listen, your dad's going to pay your ransom. Everything's going to be okay. Don't worry too much. Now, Princess Fyhia is still bound, okay? Now, about 45 minutes before the king, she begins to make her move to try to make an escape. And only 15 minutes before the king arrives, she actually leaps up, okay, and she kicks Tormel to the ground, and she runs like crazy, okay? So at that point, Praish and Tormel both start running after her. Well, Tormel, out of pure habit, pulls out a blade, okay, because he's used to running, he's used to having a blade in his hand whenever he's chasing someone, right? So he catches her, kicks her to the ground, and jumps on top of her to subdue her, and accidentally slashes her left eye, wide open. Okay. Now he doesn't. He slashes her eye, or her face, and her eyebrow. He does not blind her in her left eye, but he puts this huge gash on her face, cuts her eyebrow wide open. Right. And now she's screaming, and she's in pain, and she's bleeding. They take her back. They clean her up, but she looks like a mess, like just a hot mess. Right. And so, because there's blood all over her face, and she had to deal with this cut, right? And she's very upset, right? Well, the king comes, and Tormel and Praish are like breathing heavy, and they're like upset from what just went down, and they have the gag back in her mouth, and at that point, Tormel and Praish also they bring her back to where. To their camp, and this time when they bring her back, they're not careful, and they actually put her near a tent stake. Okay, all right, and so the king just kind of walks in, interrupts like all this, and he's like, "Hey, I have the 2 carts, right?" And they're like, "Great, we have your daughter, right?" So they're kind of like grumpy, especially Tormel, and so so Tormel pulls up Princess Fyhia. And the king says, "Hey, her face is all cut up, right?" And Tormel and Praish said, Tormel says, "Yes, there was a skirmish. Your daughter tried to escape, but she's okay. We're returning you to her. You're going to give us the gold now." And he goes, "Well, listen, I fulfilled my end, and I brought these 2 carts of gold to you, but you're not fulfilling your end when Princess Fyhia is a princess who was going to marry Princess Lisharn. And that was important to my kingdom because that is an alliance for my kingdom," right? And at this point, Praish is like, "What? That's terrible. Like that's he says, it's a cut. Like it will heal." And he goes, "Look at that. That's deep. It's never going to heal. I will give you 1 cart." So the king of Moresh says, "I'm going to give you 1 cart." And at that point, Tormel and Praish just look at each other, and they start arguing with him like, "This is insane. This is your daughter, right?" Well, at that point, her Princess Fyhia stands up, right? She stakes Praish from behind, killing him, right? He doesn't die immediately, and then she just runs like crazy, right? And so Tormel and King of Moresh start chasing her, right? She's still bound at her hands, but not at her feet, right? But she has all this energy, and she catches a lucky break. She turns 2 or 3 places in the forest, and then she just hides in a log, right? And Tormel and King of Moresh, they run. They actually end up about a mile away from her. They can't find her, and Tormel gets so upset that he kills King Moresh. Okay, so now Praish is dead. King of Moresh is dead. Tormel is furious. Tormel goes back. He leads the carts away. He gives 1 of the carts to the wizard. He keeps the other cart for himself. And then at that point, Princess Fyhia is just in the forest, okay? And she doesn't even know what to do. She's lost, right? Back at the castle. So I'm going to tell you what happens at the castle and what happens with Queen Moresh. And then we'll circle back to Princess Fyhia, okay? So we go back to court. About a week or 2 pass, and it becomes evident to the court that the king is dead. His body is never found, okay? But he never returns. None of the gold is ever found, and Princess Fyhia is not found, right? So no one knows what happened, right? So at that point, Queen of Moresh is very upset, but she contacts the king and queen in Lisharn and says, listen, we would like to marry our youngest daughter to Prince Lisharn. They get the message. They now understand what's going on in the kingdom of Moresh, and the king of Moresh says, hey, you know what, to his his court and to his military advisors, this is going to be a great alliance, but you know what, let's just take the land. So let's go to war, and we're going to take over Moresh, and we'll get their treasure and we'll get their land, because right now nobody's seen the king of Moresh for 2 weeks, and that whole kingdom is an upheaval, right? So he sends in, actually, he doesn't even think he needs, so he only sends in a third of his forces, right? And actually, the Queen of Moresh is highly loved by her people, and her people, immediately, once the borders of their own land are breached, word echoes back to the queen immediately. The queen scrambles, and the kingdom of Lisharn had made a mistake. So the queen of Lisharn had many allies throughout the realm, throughout the world of Thracian, and one of those allies was directly to the east of the kingdom of Moresh, right? So the queen of Moresh, Princess Fyhia's mother, completely rallies her people and then begins a war with the kingdom of Moresh in earnest. She has to scramble and get gold and additional military forces from her allies. And the war takes 3 years, and it is brutal on the kingdom of Lisharn and on kingdom of Moresh. But the kingdom of Lisharn is defeated by the kingdom of Moresh. The queen of Moresh is successful in defeating them, okay? Now, when she does that, though, rather than take their land and, fill it with her own people, she actually puts Prince Lisharn in position as the king, okay? So, and she does not take the land, okay? And now there's an alliance between Lisharn and the kingdom of Moresh again, all right? Now, let's go back to 3 years past, right after Princess Fyhia has killed Presh and escaped from Tormol and Presh and from her own father, okay? And so she's in this log. She comes out the next morning. She just wanders around the forest. And then for another 3 days, she's still wandering through the forest. But as soon as she goes missing, word goes out among the kingdom. And as soon as old Melniboke finds out, he immediately goes to the forest and he begins just riding through the forest, playing his tunes, right? Well, 3 days later, she hears his tunes, and he comes over to her, and he finds her, and he sees her face, and he's like, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry for what happened to you. Her face is like a horrible mess because she hasn't had any real health, any help for her face for the last 3 days. And he's like, I will help you, no worries, okay? And he does. He cleans her up. And he says, okay, well, I know this looks terrible, but, I think you feel better now. I'm so glad I found you. I'm glad, I killed this rabbit and made a stew for you, and you seem a lot better. Let me get you back to the court. And Princess Fyhia says, no, I am never returning to that court. All my father cared about was my pretty face and so that he could marry me off to Prince Lisharn, and I'm never going back to that life. And old Melniboke tries again to convince her, and says, but then she says, listen, I want to do what you do. I want to make people happy with my music. And actually, old Melniboke goes, it's not really what I do. Actually, I'm an adventurer, right? And I actually serve with an adventuring group. And when I would come to your court, that was like my vacation. That's not really what I do. I have a lot more skills than singing, right? And she's like, really? Right? And he's like, yeah. So at that point, he takes her on as an apprentice, and he teaches her how to be a true adventuring bard. And that's what he does that for 2 years. She excels at it, right? But in order to do this, she takes on masks, right? So actually, old Melniboke and her both take on masks, and they form this new kind of acting troupe where they can switch out their masks very, very quickly, and they can do these weird two people plays, right? So they begin to travel through Lisharn and through Maresh, okay? And all along, old Melnibok is saying, hey, you know, things have gotten better. Why don't you go back to your mom? And she's like, well, you know, I don't really ever want to return to the court. That was a bunch of crap, and this is for me. And, you know, and I don't really know what part my mom had in it and what part she didn't. And I know she loved me, but I thought my father loved me. And so she's really twisted up about the whole thing. And at that point, finally, you know, about after training her for 2 years, old Melnibok says, hey, my name, old Melnibok, is the real deal. I really am very old, and I've taught you everything I know, and this has become very hard for me. I can't adventure anymore. So, so at that point, she goes out on her own and becomes an adventurer on her own, and that is the story of Fyhia, the human bard, with a noble background. Thank you very much. Take care, everybody.